Welcome to Secrets for an Inspirational Life with Mimi Novic, the place where every heart tells its story. Whether it's inspiration, courage or hope you need, you've come to the right place. Sit back and enjoy the journey with us. Subscribe below to be sure you don't miss future episodes.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Secrets for an Inspirational Life. How are you all today? I hope that you are well. I hope that there is a little bit of love in the air. And that I think is something that truly, for me who wears rose-colored glasses always, for sure, and I love them and I try to keep them on as much as possible. Love is something that keeps everybody hopeful, alive, and feeling wonderful. And yet, it's so difficult sometimes. And people always say, love is so difficult, but it's not love. I don't believe love is difficult. We as people can be difficult, but love is a pure essence that I think abides in all of us. And it's something that we all search for in our life, whether that be with partners, with children, with family and friends. It's a golden thread that interweaves within our lives, and it's something beautiful. And I always believe in those that I love telling them so, because life is really far too short not to tell those people that you love them. So, with that in mind, I have to say that I'm absolutely delighted to welcome my guest today, who is Faisal Khokhar. Faisal is a life coach for single men and is known for his groundbreaking 5 fractures framework, which has been transforming thousands of men, especially those with the nice guy syndrome, to reclaim their confidence, ignite masculine charisma, and achieve dating success after rejection, divorce, or heartbreak. He has spoken on stages from London to Australia, sharing his insights with industry leaders like Amazon and ASOS, and also collaborating with world-renowned figures such as Tony Robbins. Faisal helps individuals uncover the self-sabotaging patterns that destroy attraction, ruin relationships, and block intimacy. In a world where many men feel invisible, isolated, and overlooked, Faisal is dedicated to helping them stand tall and become the kind of men who are truly admired, desired, and respected. Wow. Today, he shares his journey. Welcome, dear Faisal.
Mimi, welcome. Yes, it's great to be here, and I love your beginning as well. That was really touching as well.
Oh, thank you. And it's an absolute pleasure and honor, Faisal, to have you here. And really, I can't wait for you to talk tonight because it's something that is incredible. It's something that touches the lives of so many people out there. And it's something really that is so important to so many men out there and women. It's not just men, it's women as well. So welcome, and thank you again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's so important for the men and also moms who have sons, and the work I do also impacts everybody else. So it's we're all interconnected here. So yeah, I'm really looking forward to just sharing some of the things I've learned about men, masculinity, relationships, and attraction, and also diving into some of the real battles that men are facing right now.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I want to talk to you about this later, but because I want to know all about you. But there's something that I want to discuss about how men are suffering these days, which I was reading about the other day, and I'm constantly reading about. So that's something that is really good that you're here, that we can talk about later. But more of that later. Firstly, let's go back a bit. How did all this begin with you? How did you become an expert? Where did it all start? A little bit about your life.
It started when my ex-wife or wife at that time, she said, I'm leaving you. And I didn't see it coming. And we've got two children, two boys, and they were like 2 and 5 years old. And when she gave me that news, I collapsed. I really was in severe pain. I remember just looking at her and, feeling this immense pain and thinking, how can you do this to me? We have 2 kids together. How can you, how dare you want to leave? And I remember falling to my knees, crying. And there was a moment in my life, I remember, and I thought to myself, well, either I get angry and I start attacking, or I take full responsibility of what happened. And within an instant, it was like a right or left decision. And I said, I'm going to take 100% responsibility. And I said to myself, this is like day one. And it was my awakening. And I love the saying, it says the universe has shaken you to awaken you. And that was my moment of, waking up, becoming conscious, realizing, oh, things happened in my life because of me.
Yeah. That's quite a statement, actually. Where did you go from there?
So my background was computer science and very logical, systematically driven. And so I wanted to find out, because a lot of the times I was in, finding solutions for problems. So I wanted to find out what happened to my marriage. Why did she want to leave me? Why did she want to rip up our family? And what was it that I did? And from there, I just went on to this journey of self-development, self-growth, started attending seminars. I had no idea about the mind, the brain, the consciousness of it, and how, I was thinking, what I was feeling. And there was a lot of things that I learned about myself. I mean, one of the things I learned was, I felt stress and anxiety, but I would never, ever label myself as an anxious person. And I remember sitting in seminar rooms as well, listening to other people going through challenges. And one of the aha moments was, oh, I'm not the only one. There's other people who are suffering. Because like most guys, I would say I was like a typical man on autopilot, unconscious. I would say most men are there. And when I realized that I'm not the only one who struggles, and I can do something a lot more about it. And the reason why marriage failed, because there were some things that I wasn't doing and I was doing, and I had no idea of them. And that was the real kick in the teeth, because I was thinking, well, this all could have been prevented.
Do you think it could have been, though? There is this notion, I suppose, of you can absolutely give your utmost best. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it just doesn't work out. You can give your whole life to somebody and it just can't work.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, 100%.
I'm not sure about that, Faisal. I don't know what you think about that, but you can give your whole life and it's still not enough, and it still doesn't work. And then you've got people out there who make absolutely no effort whatsoever, and it works out for them. I mean,
yes,
what's
of course,
that all about?
Yeah, of course. You are going to have, it's all individual based, and it's based on, circumstances, because yes, there are some people that you're never going to be compatible with. It's like a cocktail mix. You put 2 chemicals together and they're never going to mix, of course. And I would say majority of the relationships are that. And for me, it was like looking back in hindsight, had I done a lot of growth work, a lot of consciousness work, would it have been a different thing? Most likely, yes. It would have been very different. But, hindsight, everything's, in
That's a
2020
wonderful
vision.
thing, isn't
Yeah,
it?
of course, of course.
Yeah.
But for this circumstances, yes. But it was a great gift. It wasn't a gift in the time. It was really painful because for 2 years, I remember going in a very dark place because I had to confront a lot of the uncomfortable truths about myself. And that wasn't easy.
It's never easy to do that. And I think let's look, for example, at grandparents and great grandparents. This we were talking about this earlier about generations and things like that. Do you feel that maybe in the past, in those times then, people used to tolerate a lot more, where people would be married for 40, 50 years, and no matter what happened, you had to work at it in a way. And that's the way it was. But these days, I feel that as soon as something little is, not quite to one of the partner's liking, it's all sort of hell breaks loose and people break up without actually really trying to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was, if you looked at our grandparents' circumstances, and if you look at poor countries, that is, I would say, still true. Because if you go back to really poor countries and you've got the breadwinner, which is usually the guy, and a woman wouldn't really have options to say, right, okay, I'm going to quit this marriage and I'll be gone. Because then she'll need to find somebody else to be the provider, looking after the kids. Whereas if you look in the West, there's a lot more options for women. So they're now, I think that 70, 80% of divorces are instigated by women because they think, well, I don't tolerate this anymore. So it's okay. I earn my money. I'm okay. Or the government supports me. I'll be okay. So therefore, we don't have that economical dependency. And also there is less shame because I remember when I went through my breakup, there was extreme amount of shame. What would my family think? What would my family think? What would my culture think? And it's not a done thing to divorce. And you're such a loser. You're such a failure. So there was a lot of shame to deal with. And I see a lot of guys will rather stay in the relationship if it's unhappy, just to avoid being, disliked or shamed or ridiculed for that.
Yes, there is that as well. You're completely right there. I think it's a cultural thing also, and also it's a family thing of how every individual has been brought up and in what circumstances as to what is accepted. I think we're all looking for love. Every single person, every single, I don't know, I go as far as saying every animal, every plant, everything. I have this whole sort of ideal world look about everything. But fundamentally, I think it is love that moves us. And I suppose it's a bit of a position thing as well, isn't it? As in, what is a man's position and what is a woman's position?
Yeah, I mean, that too definitely takes a part. And you're right, because, we are all looking for, love, connection, um, feeling that, we are important, being useful in life as well. So there's all these basic needs. And Tony Robbins did a really good job of like there's 6 human needs, or 4 of them are primary needs of love and connection, uncertainty, certainty, and significance. And then we've got the spiritual need, and then we've also got the need for, growth as well. So if you look at humans, I look at humans sometimes as software or like programming, and it just helps me to understand the challenges and then find solutions to that. So yeah, I mean, we have a lot of cultural and also religion constraints in us and how we move. And the programming that we got earlier on is like, yeah, you if you have challenges, you have problems, you work through them. So again, I think the new generation is very much oversensitive and pain avoidant. Oh, it's too much. I'm not going to do it. So I'm just not going to get involved.
Yes, that's correct. And I think actually that's not just for relationships. I think that's sort of for everything. I
Everything,
see
yeah.
that, isn't it? It's like, I can't be bothered. It's too much. What do you mean it's bloody too much? It's too much. Well, what's too much? Oh, I can't be hassled with it. Well, put
Yeah.
and you just sort of a little bit you're in despair, because you think, but you're never going to achieve anything, unless you get to know who you really are, unless you deal as you did, with yourself. How are you going to find a partner that's compatible? You can give your best. You see, you can go through all of this work, Faisal, and you can be the best that you can be. But that doesn't guarantee that you will find a partner that is the best that they can be. And then what happens?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there is the thing is you can do all the work. There is no guarantee. But there is one, I would say, and I'm using the word guarantee loosely here, but there is
Mhm.
something that you will definitely gain from doing all the work. You will gain better self-esteem,
Yes.
self-worth.
Mm.
You'll raise your standards. You'll feel good about yourself because there is more resilience. There's more grit. You have higher tolerance. Not like the current Gen Z kind of generation is. Oh, it's too much. I can't handle it.
Yeah.
So those will be the benefits. It might not always transpire into that you'll have the partner or the one or relationship, but it
Correct.
also, yeah,
Mm.
but it'll impact. For me, the greatest gift that the breakup, the divorce gave me was I was able to start learning about myself, finding out some of the missing parts that I was causing me trouble, and then to raise my sons in a much more powerful way, in a more loving way. Not always good at it. I'm just,
Well, I
I
mean,
think,
you try.
yeah, of course, of course.
Mm.
And parenting is probably the most difficult thing on earth. And also, it's given me the gift of having a really incredible relationship with my sister. I am so close to her. I spend a lot of time with her, and my niece and nephew and brother-in-law. So that is a gift that it came from adversity. So there's always a gift. It doesn't always have to transpire into a romantic relationship, but the relationship I have with myself, that is the biggest change, and also then how it's overflowed into everybody else around me.
And that's the point, that people say to me, I would like to change so that I can find a man or to find a woman. And I always say to them, it's not about that, actually. That is a nice
Mm.
little sort of icing on the cake if you find it. But the point is to gain all these things that you speak about, the confidence, the self-esteem, to actually understand yourself more deeply. And in a world where people run from themselves, what you're doing, Faisal, is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, we spend a lot of time in the external world trying to find the outside world and hoping, if I find my partner, if I find the one, I'll be happy. And that is not the case because we've got to start the relationship on a good footing. And that means, how do you feel about yourself? How do you talk to yourself? How do you
Mm.
relate to yourself? And that's such an important place to begin with. But yet, we're programmed, and also it's not just our programming or the messages. It's just like one of the things I've learned so much recently or lately is how much evolution programming that we have. So, what we were doing 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, a million years ago. And again, just like you have the latest iPhone, it's not the first time that software has existed. It was generations and generations and generations of programming that came to the current model. And same thing with us as well. We have generations and generations of programming that doesn't always serve us in the modern world, but it can help us understand and explain some of the behavior that we have.
Yes, it's generational because we all have the gene of so many ancestors. Um, Me and Faisal, for people out there listening, were talking earlier about generational um, bloodlines and how we are all affected by our grandparents and great grandparents and things we sort of seemingly think, oh, I don't know, let's put it down to I love pasta, I love the pyramids. Who knows, Who knows who our great grandparents were and where they came from and why this um, love of certain thing and dislike of certain thing. And I think once we actually take that into account, we become
Mm.
more wholesome, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. I was very interesting, Mimi. I was listening to a podcast about health and food,
Uh-huh.
and the expert was saying is um, find out what kind of food your generation's at, because that's the kind of food that will probably be the most um, healthy for you. Because if you're not used to, or your DNA is not used to that kind of food, I mean, I'm not an expert on this, but it was very interesting. So people who maybe lived in Nordic countries for many
Mm.
generations, they might be, suitable for certain type of food. And those who lived in maybe South Asia, more spices, that kind of food was more, uh, your body had adapted more to that kind of soil and that kind of food. So if you look at a human body and human mind and thinking, and you're always thinking about us, our humans, we're always adapting. And that's called, adaptation in evolution psychology. So we're constantly adapting. And those adaptations take some time. So for example, right now, how many people would be afraid of public speaking? I think there was a survey done, and one of the biggest fear was public speaking. But there's nothing physically dangerous about public speaking, but yet we have this fear. Where does this fear come from? Well, it's an evolutionary adaptation of putting yourself out there. Maybe you could be ridiculed, maybe you could be shamed, maybe 100,000 years ago, if you did that, you could be executed or killed. So there's
Mm.
always these primary responses that we have, that we're constantly battling, and these show up in relationships a lot of the times.
That's so interesting what you say. Firstly, about the food, I actually believe that totally. Um, and also, we are everyone that came before us. That's who we are. And I think
Mm.
it's absolutely fascinating because we have to look back at our heritage. And if we can, of course, sometimes it's not always possible, um, but a little bit. And even if we can't find it, but see what sort of things do we like? What sort of things are we drawn to? What places are we drawn to? Because I know that, I mean, I've traveled the world and I can honestly say to you that I don't belong anywhere and yet I belong everywhere. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Is it certain climate or something that you gravitate towards?
Yeah, because I love deserts, for example. I
Hmm.
absolutely love deserts and I feel at home there. And I love the dryness of the temperature and it makes me feel good. So I think if we did more of that, actually admitted to ourselves, what do actually we really like? What do we
Hmm.
love to do, to eat, to see, as opposed to what's been, in a way, imposed upon us?
Yeah. So the winter time in the UK and all the cold
For
countries are
example, yes.
Yeah, yeah. I think I'm the same as well. But I do. I know some people who just love the cold.
Yeah,
They have a cold climate adaptation, and they love that. I'm like, no, I like hot. I like desert. I like spices. I like these kind of,
yeah,
those those kind of suit my temperament more. And my body naturally becomes at ease. And I think this is something that's so important,
yeah,
is that we're so disconnected from listening to our body. I mean, especially men, because we spend a lot of time in our heads ruminating, thinking, being logical, and being less connected to our body, to seeing, okay, what is it telling me? What's the responses? So we're again more on autopilot.
this is a very, very good point because have you heard of Ayurveda?
Oh, is that a band?
No, no. So Ayurveda is like an alternative medicine system that was its roots are in the Indian subcontinent. And it talks about different states of different people and how everyone has a certain state and a certain temperament. And I always, going into sort of the deeper text, and I'm no expert in this, but I've met people who are very knowledgeable, is that we tend to align with people that are of the same temperament as us. And that's just not, when we're talking physically or, from the same nationality, it doesn't have to be that. It's actually a personality temperament where, for example, as you speak, desert spices, hot weather, someone similar would be more on your wavelength. That's the principle in a lot of these complementary medicines. Someone would be similar to your type. And I think when we go too far from what is comfortable for us, is where there lies a lot of problems in relationships.
Mm, Yeah, because you have a lot of compatibility issues. For example, if you went back 20,000 years ago, you'd be surrounded by your tribe and you would stay within your tribe. And that tribe would mold your characteristics and behavior. And you might, say, venture out and meet a completely different tribe. And those tribes, would be, I would say, non-compatible. You might have different rituals, different flavors, different temperaments. So when you would go back to your tribe, you would feel at home. And that's one of the key things about even relationships as well, because sometimes you can have two very different temperaments. And there's no saying that opposites attract, which is, I don't think it's very true. And I think there was some research done that you need at least 20% difference in temperament. And if it starts getting beyond that, then it starts becoming more conflict, there's more resistance, and there's more constant conversations about the flow of it.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what about, for example, let's talk about friends for a moment. Would you say that's the same as in friendship or even family members? Doesn't mean that if we're family members that we're going to get on, um, does it? I think it's more of a deeper connection. I had a friend and she met her future husband, and she was from Germany and he was from India. But it turns out that they both had Persian grandparents and they didn't know why they got on, but they just got on. And it seemed quite a stark difference, but they got on and it was some sort of familiarity. When they say there's famous quotes when they say, when I met somebody, I felt I was back home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, it's always, this is the beyond the logical thinking, and there can be things that we can just fuse and bond over, the things that we don't always see. And I know there's, for example, I'm more of the desert. That's my kind of flavor. But I know guys who and they're English guys, and their flavor is more like the Asian style, the Japanese, and they're really into that. And I went recently to Japan with them, and they just felt at home. They felt like this is me. This is like real deep into, they were really deep into the culture, the language, and for them it wasn't just like they were on a holiday, but they had been many times before, and that was like the place that called to them. So we can always have a different calling, and it might not always seem that it's right from the present. It could be many, many things away from our past that could have that calling or bring us to it.
Isn't it fascinating? That's such a fascinating story. I have a friend and she's Pakistani, and we have a love of Japanese things, and somehow we feel related because we love Japanese things. And I don't know where that came from, but we just love that part of the world. So I totally get it. There is something in the soul, I think, that connects people for sure. It's not just a physical attraction, it has to be a soul connection, surely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I remember when my coach, and he said that we were talking about energies, and he was saying that every part of the earth or the soil, the ground has its own energy and its own magnetic pull. For example, Glastonbury has this appeal to some people. Bali has an appeal to some people. I mean, it wasn't for me. The desert again has an appeal. So there's different parts that we energetically resonate, and maybe you grab. We probably vibrate at that frequency, which we think, oh, okay, this is more me. And I know that when I spend time in the Sahara Desert, it's there is something about it that feels like, okay, this is quite natural, and I'm here. So yeah, I think there's something more much on an energetic level than our thoughts.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, I actually love Glastonbury. I had somebody on the podcast the other day who was from Glastonbury, and he was actually we were talking, and he was at Glastonbury Tor, which is a very energetic point in the world, Glastonbury. But I totally get it, and I totally get the desert where I feel totally at home, and I don't know, I kiss the floor of the desert every time I go because I think this is where I belong. And people say to me, but it's so empty. But to me,
Mm.
it's so full.
It is. Desert has a lot of history as well. Have you read the book The Alchemist?
Oh my goodness. I have that in my suitcase constantly. I
Yeah.
absolutely love it. Yes.
Yeah, what a beautiful book. When I remember my friend, he gave it to me, he said, Faisal, I think you're going to like this book. And then I started to read this book, and within 2 days, I finished the book, and I think, wow, it had all the personal development, all the lessons of
Yeah.
life in just one book, from relationships to focus to success to trusting to gut intuition to purpose. Just like everything that you could think about was in
Yeah.
that book.
Yeah. 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 Um, and for people out there, I'm sure a lot of you have actually read the book, and if you haven't, it's by Paulo Coelho. And one of my favorites is in the book, Faisal, is the crystal merchant,
Mm.
who the boy, I don't want to ruin it for people who haven't read the book as yet, but the boy goes on his quest to find true love, and he meets a crystal merchant. And that's such an analogy for life, where he makes him enough money, the crystal merchant, because he's always dreaming of going to Mecca. But when the boy arrives, he suggests to put the tea in the crystal glasses, And they make so much money that the crystal merchant says, I can go to Mecca. And he doesn't, because he says to the boy, but then what will I dream about?
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's so true, isn't it?
and how many people in this world actually say, I'm not going to follow my dreams because then what will I dream about? And life
And
empties itself.
yeah. And a lot of people have that as well, don't they? I don't know if everyone has it, but some people I know that don't have massive dreams. They just want to do the simplest thing and just get on with it. Some people have the purpose of having a relationship, and then there's people who have a purpose of doing something in the world.
Do you think, going back to what you said about people fear public speaking, do you think it's actually that we are afraid of our dreams, that we then don't speak about them and therefore we don't fulfill them?
It could be. It could be. Maybe. So what I've seen about people's dreams, I mean, I have big ambitions and big dreams as well. And sometimes that fear comes in because you're thinking, will I be able to pull it off? Have I got what it takes? Am I going to be okay with a lot of obstacles that are going to come my way? Can I be bothered? Is it going to take a lot of energy? Do I have the energy? So a lot of your thoughts, limiting beliefs, everything starts to trickle down and it starts to dampen that dream. And most of us, I guess, if you do ask most people, what dreams they have, especially when later in life, sometimes they're so worn out by life itself. They're thinking, well, what's the point?
Oh, what a sad line.
Yeah,
That
it
it's
is. It
true.
is. Yeah, it is. It is. It could be sad, or it could be just, that's way, how the world operates.
Such a sad line. I, I, I don't want people to feel like that. I don't want to feel like that. Um, I want people to have the courage to follow their dreams. And I suppose with your work, you're somehow enabling, aren't you, people to fulfill who they really are, and therefore that gives them the opportunity, the best opportunity then, to become all that they could be. Would I be right in saying that?
Yeah, and it gives them a lot of us, and I felt this incredibly as well, is powerless. We don't feel like we have autonomy. We don't feel like we have power. We don't feel like we always can stand up and do things and do it without, because most of us, we're quite fearful of judgment, criticism, what people would think. So we have a lot of barriers against us. And sometimes, those barriers overwhelm us, take over, and then we don't always have our cheerleaders. We don't have the support around us. I mean, how many people, when I was growing up, there wasn't, I don't think I could think of anyone who was saying, yeah, go on, Faisal, tell me your dreams and let me know what they are. And no one was on my side. And I know that I'm not the only one. And most of the time, our parents are busy raising us and they're in, okay, do we have enough money? Do we have this? That's what they're focusing on. They're not focusing on dream. They're just focusing on survival and making sure that, the pain, the problems that we have, we can override them. So dreams, no, we haven't got time for that. We've got to sort out the problems in front of us.
So where do our dreams go?
Yeah, that's a good question. Where do they go?
Yeah,
Probably in books. They probably end up writing the
I think
books
we've
about
got
it.
an alchemist moment here. Where do they go?
Yeah,
Or do they not go? Do they just sleep? Do they fall asleep until we awaken them?
yeah. And I guess we can really tap into that. Do you have any dreams that you want to pursue more of?
And sort of professionally speaking, or life.
Either, or just either.
I think my whole life is a dream, really, Faisal. Um, I
Well,
don't
that's good because some people might say that my whole life is a nightmare.
know, it's a dream in the sense of I'm always dreaming about something, you know, about places, about people, about things, um, how this could be, how that could be. Uh, I always want to be sort of ignited with this fire of dreams. And because of that, I want to also remind people of their dreams. And I can't teach anybody or show anybody anything other than sort of to shine the light. I think all we could ever do is shine the light um, for you to rediscover your dreams, for example, or you to shine the light for me to discover mine. And if we were to have people in our lives who did just that, you know, the dream catchers, the dream shiners, I think that would be a rather flipping lovely world.
Yeah, you can definitely, or you can get yourself a coach who'll kick your ass and say, just get on with it. Right?
Well,
If you've got
yes,
a, yeah, because if you've got
which
a
a coach
dream,
like you, for example. Now let's come back
yeah.
from The Alchemist and bring it back down to earth for a moment.
Hmm.
Now, you do something which really intrigued me, and that is that you help um, the nice guy syndrome men. Is that correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Where are the nice guys? Why are you helping them not to be nice? Or but you are helping them to be nice. What are you doing actually?
Yeah, so this is quite uh, challenging to understand at first because I help men
Hmm.
or we call them nice guy syndromes to stop being nice. And you're thinking, what? Yeah, we're
Oh,
getting away them from the nice guy syndrome. So the nice guy
hmm.
syndrome is misnomer. It's just another word for a codependent people pleaser.
Give me an example for me and for people out there. Describe
Yeah,
a situation of a Mr. Nice Guy syndrome situation.
yeah. So a nice guy syndrome. You must have heard the term "nice guys finish last." Have you heard of that one?
No.
Okay, so a nice guy syndrome, aka the codependent people pleaser. So nice guys, men would normally say, "Hey, I'm a really nice guy, and because I'm a nice guy and I do nice things and I please you, and because I please you, why do I not get what I want?"
Uh-huh.
That's yeah,
Like a
just
people pleaser.
absolutely. Because I've been nice to you, I've been kind to you. What they have is something, they have an expectation. So because I've been kind to you, I'm owed something back in return. Because I haven't been horrible, I need something back. So what nice guys tend to do, and they'll seek approval, validation, just to make sure that they're seen and they're depicted as a really good person. And behind the scenes, it's a very different story. But from the outside world, they're super friendly, very smiley because they don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to look like a bad person. They're very, very self conscious about how they come across. They always want to come across nice. Right. But
Uh-huh.
inside, it's a different story. And we can start unpacking some of the nice guys. And what I've done is I've created like a five fractures or five areas that nice guys or even nice girls, people pleasers, they struggle in.
So what does that mean? You've created a method called the
Mm-hmm.
five fractures. What does that
Yeah.
actually mean, and what does it entail?
Yeah. So five fractures is a, so our relationships have fractures in them. And I identified that there's five of them that really cause us a lot of problems because there is so much stuff on the internet and hundreds of thousands of books on psychology. You don't know where to go. So what I did was I identified 5 areas that we really need to work on. So the first area was like the nerve fracture. So it's a fracture where we have a primal fear of danger, and we're driven by uncertainty that makes us feel anxious, unsafe. So, for example, if somebody has a nerve fracture, they will rush into relationships. So they have a lot of anxiety around relationships. Or if they're really fractured, they'll avoid relationships. So someone with a nerve fracture can be also very oversensitive, and they can panic easily. And they're constantly overthinking every single mistake. They'll be ruminating about that. Someone with a nerve fracture might also be quite socially anxious, so they might end up isolating themselves. They also will show characteristics of being very impulsive and impatient. I want everything now. And they'll make choices, or they'll say things, they'll do some things in the relationship very, impulsively. Another characteristics of someone with a nerve fracture is, if you say, for example, you guys as a partner are questioning each other, or they get questioned, they might end up over explaining, over justifying themselves, apologizing, fawning, attacking. So they'll go into those response modes, and they need constant reassurance, constant soothing. And nowadays, a lot of people with a nerve fracture will get their constant soothing from social media, because they'll be on their phone and they'll go into this cycle of, stimulation, then soothing, stimulation, soothing. And unfortunately, social media is designed, a lot of apps are designed to exploit the nerve fracture. So we have constant stimulation, and in relationships, it just makes us feel very unsafe.
And it's the nerve fracture.
Yeah. So we have a nervous fracture. Yeah.
Okay. So what are the 5 fractures?
Okay. So you got the nerve fracture.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is the ego fracture, which is all about self-worth, and it believes that I'm unworthy. And then you got the third one, which is called the emotional fracture, which believes I'm unlovable. Fourth one is the sexual fracture, which believes that I'm undesirable. And we've got the fifth one, which believes I'm unfulfilled. So I'm disconnected and purposeless.
So are you saying that these are sort of like 5 types of personality?
They're more like 5 areas of problems that we suffer.
Oh, I see.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So
and that's something that you are able to guide. Is it just men that you deal with, Faisal, or do you deal with women as well?
Well, I used to coach women, and then I started to focus more on men, because it was easier to speak one language. So if I'm just speaking to the guys, because if I'm helping guys, there's a slight difference. There's not that much difference that we need to do, but men have slightly different needs and requirements and wants than women do. So, for example, if you look at love, so how do we experience love? And if you ask most, like, for example, maybe let me ask you, what does love mean to you?
Are you asking me, actually, really?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. How do you feel love, or how do you experience love?
Oh, love is the essence of my life, and how I experience it. It's the meaning of my life. I actually live for love.
Okay. And how would you know that somebody is in love or not love?
What, in their relationship or towards me?
Yeah.
Or...
Well, we can just talk about relationships. Yeah. How would you know if somebody's in love or not in love?
There's a certain light to them. They shine differently. When I see people that are in love, they shine. There is this illumination that comes from them. You can't actually put your finger on it. It's sort of, you can't describe it. It's just, there is a spring in their step. They sort of feel aligned to a far greater purpose in that moment.
Yeah.
There is a sort of, intimacy with the universe, I suppose, and with the divine.
So it's quite a um, feeling experience.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And so with men, and again, I'm just generalizing here, and it's not to say all men, and it's not to say all women. I'm just going to use just generalize here because it'll be easier just to have some reference points.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So if you, for men, and if you went back even 10,000, 100,000 years ago, so a lot of women will say, why isn't he all lovey-dovey and why isn't he all this bouncing down the road with love and joy and things like that, right? Why isn't he just want to cuddle me and, write romantic stuff like that? I mean, guys do. I'm not saying they do. I mean, I did for sure, definitely. But where men really feel of a lack of love is through respect. That's their language. So you can give a man, and you can look at this amongst men. So if you have a tribe of men, what they would value isn't the emotion, but they would value the connection of, say, for example, the integrity, the words, the opinion. And I remember I was this lady was asking me. She said, why I'm trying to listen to my husband, but he stopped talking to me, doesn't really express anymore, and he says he doesn't feel love anymore. And I said, okay. I said, so when he does express, do you negate his opinions? She said, yeah. I said, there you go.
Give an example of that.
So, for example, and I remember this, and again, this was happening in my marriage as well. So to me, when somebody negates an opinion I have, to say, no, that's not true, or that's wrong, or what are you talking about? So to me, I've been completely shut down about my opinion. And again, I'm not saying that this just happens just to men, but there's far greater emphasis put on opinions than there is emotions. For example, if a woman comes and she says, I feel this, and said, don't be ridiculous. How can you feel that? By me negating your feelings, as in like, you're ridiculous, that how can you feel that? Because I don't feel it. So therefore it's like, why are you feeling that? It's silly. But because you're feeling it and I'm not accepting it, then you feel hurt from that. And guys feel emasculated, or guys feel wounded when their opinion isn't validated or accepted. So we can be quite sensitive towards our feelings, and then women can be quite, again, I'm generalizing, be sensitive to their feelings, the opinions and feelings. So the masculine is usually more opinion biased, and the feminine is more feeling biased.
So if a man comes to you, for example, so that people out there know what you do, and it can help them, of course. If a man comes to you and he has had a tragic breakup and he feels rubbish about himself, and he can't have another relationship, and he's low on self-esteem, he has no confidence, he's feeling down, and he doesn't know how to get out of it, what can you do to help him?
Okay, so usually I'd be the second step. I wouldn't be the first step. So the first step would be go to therapy, because a lot of the times the guys do want to be seen. They want to be just express. So their emotional side just needs to vent out. I mean, some guys do. I mean, some guys just want, like, okay, tell me the system. Tell me what I need to do. Just give me the blueprint. Just tell me what I need to do from recover from this, and then start feeling good about myself. So you have two different types of guys, but usually the guys who are in a really dark place, I would say get therapy first, get those help first. because you need to really start to become in more of a cognitive place where you can start taking the lessons of coaching. And again, for guys, and here's the thing about men as well. For example, science shows that when women express their feelings, the cortisol levels drop. When men spend a lot of time just talking, like talking therapy is more feminine based, it can raise their stress levels.
Oh, really?
Again, yeah. So this is why, women will say, just talk about your emotions. Talking about emotions without being action oriented will stress me up. So there is no solution. Because 100,000 years ago, or even 10,000 years ago, when the men went out hunting, they wouldn't spend so much time discussing and talking about their feelings. They'll be discussing more strategy. So, for example, if you're studying strategy and one has a plan or a system, that's why they will take opinions far more. People will die for honor than they would die for feelings. So if you disrespected the higher, I remember there was a plane crash, and it was a Japanese airline, and they've changed the rules. Thank God for that. They've changed the rules. But the pilot, the captain, was making a grave mistake, but his co-pilot, because he wasn't his level, remained quiet because he didn't want to offend. But yet he knew that the cost is going to be the whole life. So he worked on the logic and the agreement than he did on emotions.
That's a very interesting point. I think actually that comes also generationally, in that everything was different before, where, for example, to my grandfather, I had the utmost respect, and I would never talk back to him. And he didn't talk a lot. He only said very poignant things, and very rarely. And you had to understand that you were only to talk if it was something important.
Yeah.
Now, some people would say, well, actually, that's sort of stifling. But for me, because he was in the military, it wasn't at all. It was actually a very good point for discipline and respect that you talk about. Because I think in order to love, you must respect. The two go hand in hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talked about the military, again, if you, again, there's some research on how many words men use and how many words women use, and women use far more words than men do in a conversation. Unless men have had alcohol. So when men have had alcohol, what happens is their masculine level drops, their feminine level or the emotional level starts to increase. And again, they'll start jabbering. I don't know if you've observed that, but you can definitely see that.
Had.
Yeah. So you can, they'll become, I love you, and I'm this. And so they tap more into their feminine.
What's that all about?
So one of the things that I learned about on my own journey was that there's this thing called the feminine and the masculine, masculine energy and feminine energy, and everything has it, polarity of life. So the earth has more, for example, if you're in London or New York, it's very much systematic, go, 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 go. And if you were, for example, we were in Hawaii, it's very much flowers and colors and aroma. That's more of the feminine. And so more men kind of reside in the masculine, not all the time, but most of the time. And then most women would reside in the feminine. But we're also having a generation where it's going the opposite way. And so we're having what you call a depolarization of our energies. So more men are now becoming more feminine, And then women, as they're becoming more successful in the workplace, they're having to do a lot of do. So the masculine is more of the doing energy. So they're connecting more with their masculine side. And again, what happens is at a deeper level, men are naturally attracted to more feminine women, and feminine women are attracted more naturally to masculine men. And when you have these men who have a shell of more feminine, she's not attracted to him. She's like, that's, we had that conversation before earlier, which was, where are the real men? And that's what she's craving for, is that where is the real masculine energy that I can feel from a man? And what would that look like? He's more decisive, knows what he wants, protector, goes out there, sets rules, sets boundaries. It's not about, again, controlling, but he sets the frame, makes the castle, his kingdom, very protected, but also very structured. And that's what the masculine is known for. Whereas the feminine is more of the flow. So, for example, an easy way to see, so I can describe this. Imagine you go to a restaurant, mm-hmm. and the plates, the tables, the deco and everything, that's the masculine. It's the structure. It's the fixed thing there. Mm-hmm. And, you've got the menu. Again, the food, the smell, the aroma, the things that are alive, the music, the ambience, that's all the feminine. And that's how it's beautiful how they complement each other. And in a current lot of relationships, we're missing that complement.
What a beautiful way to put that, Faisal. I actually was there in that restaurant for that moment. And that took me there, because I totally understand. It's sort of the delicateness of the dance between the male and the female. There is this symphony, isn't there, that's always going on.
Absolutely. And it always has. I mean, even if you're the desert, the sand itself is the masculine, and then you've got the sunset or the sunrise, the feminine, which is constantly, up and down and changing.
And what is the wind in the desert?
Again, it's the feminine, because it's changing. There's no structure to it. It flows, the smell, this taste, all of that thing. That's something that's alive, is the feminine. The feminine energy is the alive energy, whereas the masculine is a structured, fixed energy.
What a lovely thought. Absolutely lovely. I'm going to think about that, because it's like a beautiful painting, and yet it's the wind that brings the perfume and the smells of the spices and the fragrances and, the incense and everything. And that is exactly, it's a whole sort of orchestra of love.
Absolutely. And they complement each other. And you said painting, you've got the canvas, but the paint itself is the feminine. What you will draw, we don't know. It's the creativity. That's the flow of it. But again, we need both in order for that to exist. You need the canvas, you need the frame, you need the structure for that application of the feminine.
And is that something that you teach men?
Absolutely. Yeah. So
and
we go
how
through.
Do you do it? Because I know people are going to be writing into me and saying, why haven't you asked him this? How do you do it?
So we boil it back down to the 5 fractures. Or I take it back down to the 5 fractures. So, for example, the emotional fracture is very much going into our feminine, which is about connecting. Now, a lot of guys, say to me, oh, and I remember, my ex said the same thing is, you're not emotionally empathetic. And I'm like, what does that mean? And you're not present. I'm like, what do they all mean? Right. So a lot of guys are like, what do you mean I'm not empathetic? And so I remember when my ex-wife, she was really upset about something. And I would then, a lot of especially nice guys, they're quite fixers. They want to fix the situation. So we wanted to fix the situation because if I fix the situation, the problem doesn't exist. If the problem doesn't exist, then then we can be at peace. So it's sort of trying to get rid of the nerve fracture, which is anxiety. I don't want to be anxious. So when we have the emotional carrying on, the masculine is that, okay, whether the feminine is high or low, you will stand grounded in that. You will experience that emotion without you taking it personally, without you caving in. And it's the same thing with whether it's with with another guy, a woman, or my children. And children are very much emotional energy or feminine energy because they're full of different emotions and thoughts. And when you've had your child who's not eaten and they're grumpy and they're tired, they're in their emotional state. And the last thing you want to do is try to have a logical conversation with that at that point. So the masculine would be understanding that what needs to be done in a more supportive way. So for example, I remember my son is like, oh, I'm feeling like this and I'm tired. And well, he was not expressing those words, but that's what I could see. And then me trying to question him on that, trying to get him into his logical wouldn't work. And then sometimes that's one of the problems that the guys have is not communicating. So one's talking logic, one's talking emotion. I said, you cannot have that conversation at that time. So what you need to do is allow the emotions to dissipate, and then you can have a logical conversation. And you do that by being present, whether it's being present or whether that's assigning a boundary, setting a boundary, or whether that's being playful about it. So, for example, if my son or anyone I'm with, they started to get abusive or they started to get disrespectful, then I would assign a boundary. I'll set a boundary and say, hey, this is not how we're going to communicate. If you're going to communicate in this way, I'm going to remove myself and then come back until either you've settled down or I need to settle down. So that's a boundary. And other ways might be, they're really upset. I might just make them laugh. And that might snap them out of their emotion or that thinking that they're in. So that's more of the emotional connection that we can get.
And is this something that you do over a period of time? Is this something that, because I know I said in the introduction that you help men where they feel invisible and isolated and overlooked. And what I wanted to say to you at the beginning, but I didn't want to start it on that note, is that I read somewhere that 75% of suicides are actually men.
Yeah.
And I was flabbergasted, and you probably know this. But why are men feeling invisible and isolated and overlooked, Faisal, in these times?
Oh, it's a really big question. But let's just boil it down to the simpler stuff. I believe that a lot of men are unguided. And men need a lot of guidance and a lot of support to be a man, to know, to instill, say, discipline, to instill virtues. And again, we both need this. Men and women need this, but men are more reliant on systems. They need, for example, I think Steve Buddy in his book, Raising Boys, he said that, for example, when there's a football game or something like that, boys needed to know the rules of the game. So what are the rules? Who's going to enforce it? And will it be enforced fairly? They needed that before they could engage really well in that system. Whereas the girls were quite... went by their feelings rather than the system itself. So that's why you have a lot of men who can be quite autistic in a way of, job's worth kind of men. They'll deal with the job, be very systematic about it, because, this is how it works. This is how a system, because if you look at most men's brain, they're quite systematic, and that's what they needed to be. I recently wrote an article which was about, um, men are, women were saying, wow, men are not emotionally available. And I'm like, yeah, that is true. They're not emotionally trained or in that depth by evolution as much as women are, because we need to be more systematic driven. And obviously what we have we're in a world where it's too much. So men are not heard, men are not listened to, men are really unguided by other strong men. Now, if in tribal days, when we had tribes, young boys would be taken from their mother, and then they'll be initiated into manhood by other men. And this was a journey I went through much later. I didn't go in my teens. I went this through in my late 30s. I remember my coach said to me, okay, Faisal, it's time for you to become a man. And I said, what do you mean a man? I'm like nearly 40 years old. I'm a man. He said, yeah, physically you're a man. You got gray hair and you're older. But he says, psychologically, you're still a boy and you need to go through an initiation process. I was really upset. I was really offended by that. But as I leaned into it and I was thinking, okay, what does this mean? And it was really much about being guided and then questioned and challenged and pushed, and then finding my own strong rooting. It's like, what is it about you that you want? And, you had to go through some challenges in your life. And a lot of men are not put through those challenges of like masculine challenges. They're not put through discipline. They're not put through test. Yeah, the army does that. But as soon as you take away those support, men are left really like, what do I do? I mean, I've coached a lot of men from the army as well, from captains to majors to everyone. And outside of the army, and they're like, okay, well, what's the structure? What's the routine? What do I do? And I say, the first thing we're going to do is where you'll start to feel strong and good about yourself is having self-care routines. You need to have routines in your life. And even for me, when there was a point in my life, I was in such a dark place. I really wanted to end my life. And I thought, logically, it'd be easier to end my life and end the suffering of myself and everybody else than it would be for me to continue. And I believe that a lot of men I've spoken to have the same thought as well. Well, if I'm not here, problem solved, done.
But that's not actually the case.
Yeah, I mean,
far from the truth. This is a lie that's been spun, that would be a way out, because that's not the way out. The way
logically it seems the way out, because if I remove myself from that equation, then
but it
people
seems
around
like an onslaught, Faisal.
It does.
Of you talk about your coach that said that you're going to become a man. I'm curious. People are not allowed to say now that they want to be who they truly are.
See, again, you use the word allowed. See, when you become an adult,
yeah,
you don't need that other people's permission. When you're a child,
this is what people think.
Absolutely. And here's the thing. And, the thing I talk about is the ego fracture. Ego is very much, when we have a fractured ego, it really cares about other people's opinions. It doesn't have the courage to be disliked. And that was one of the things I did about, like evolving and growing was, okay, you've got an opinion, I've got an opinion. If you don't like my opinion, I'm okay about it. And my ego, okay, sometimes, I'm not saying it's perfect. It does get very immature. And that's where the immature or the fractured ego is. It takes things personally. right? It will take things personally. It will be very critical of others, so it can take away the focus from itself to other people. So when you have
That's a
I would
very
say,
clever trick, isn't it? Of
yeah,
the ego.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just it's a protective mechanism. It just means
Mm.
that, I don't want to hear the truth. And the thing about coaching is, hey, we're going to tell you the truth. And the ego will first fight it, hate it, would reject it. But as I say, the truth will hurt first, but then it'll set you free. And unfortunately, most people are very fractured in their ego, and they can't be wrong. They don't want to know. They'll ignore it. They'll have a spoiled brat reflex, I call it. They'll be like, no, that's not the way it is, rather than saying, could it be? Especially around relationships. There's a lot relationships. I would say ego really comes out for the feminine, for women, a lot comes out there. And when it comes to, say, money, ego can really, men can be really fragile there or fractured there.
And how did it all happen like this? Because I remember in the olden times, and I talk like I'm 200 years old, but you understand, when I was younger, um, there weren't these complexities as there are now that I'm an adult. As a child, there was none of this. Everybody knew their place. And from what I could tell, everybody was more comfortable in their own skin than they are these days.
Well, we had community, we had family, we had
Oh, yeah.
unity, right? So at the moment, we are tribal people. We are community people. Now, in the West, if you look at most people, they're very isolated. So if you're isolated and you're a guy who's like, I work from home and I hardly interact with people. I know a lot of successful men who are like that. And then you've also got hey, I'm a strong, independent woman. And what's happening is you've got no one giving you feedback. There's no mirror. And you've got parents who are so sensitive, they don't want to tell their parents no. We have a lot of parents who are afraid to say no. And I was one of those parents too. Now, for example, I run my house in a very systematic, structured way, which is very purposeful way. So, for example, I have strict rules about mobile phone use. So even for myself and everybody else who comes into my house, you will have strict rules about mobile phone use. Why? Because it's there to safeguard our mental health and anybody else's. At 10 o'clock.
Oh, I'm very pleased to hear that.
Yeah. So like 10 o'clock is like my phone has to go off. Unless I'm working, unless I'm traveling, fine. I understand those. First thing I get up in the morning, for example, I'm not touching my phone for the first hour. My son, who, when we got divorced, was living with mom, came here. He went through so much challenges himself. That's another story. But I remember he went through a lot of PTSD. He had severe OCD, and he had to move in with me. And he came here, and he was having like 10 showers a day, washing his hand like 50 times. It was all bleeding. I had to call, we had to hire psychologists to help him. And one of the things I did was to help his nervous system was to bring in systems in place. What a system does, it brings in something that we need is predictability. Predictability brings in reassurance. It makes us feel safe. It gives us certainty. Imagine, you're waiting for your test results for a health and you don't know what they are. That uncertainty causes you a lot of tension and a lot of stress. And same thing in a relationship. When we have a lot of uncertainty, it causes a lot of unrest.
So, Faisal, which sort of rules did you bring in to implement that structure of safety for your son?
So we had bedtime routine, phone use, self-care. I gave them morning routines to do on a weekend. So what are they grateful for? What are they going to focus on? Um, what lessons they've learned. Give them structured for introspection as well. What responsibility can they do? So I did a lot of the work I did on myself. I started to pass that on, and helping them have more of a predictability, more structure, made them feel a lot more calmer. And it wasn't just my sons. It was also, I remember when I was in relationships, and when my girlfriend, they would come over, they'd have the same structure as well. And I remember one of the girls I was with at the time, and she says, "I love this." She says, because I don't trust myself to be on my, I'm on phone sometimes, I pick it up. And when you have these routines in place, which are to safeguard us from, say, causing us unhealthy habits, she goes, "I feel good about myself." She goes, "I feel a lot more healthier." And I said, look, it's one of those things that we need to be called up to a higher self. And we do that by supporting each other. So, for example, my coaches help me because they instill habits in me, they instill structure in me. But it doesn't mean that it's completely fixed, because, my life isn't black and white. My life also has a lot of color in it as well. And that's what the feminine brings in. It brings in those different things that I don't always naturally see. So it's the balance of the yin and yang.
Yes. And I think it's very important to have a flowing structure, so to speak, because, of all the masters that you have out there that are very, very highly trained in many aspects of whatever type of background they're from, every single one of them practices the art of discipline. I think that's a very, very important thing. And people think, yeah, but that's not freedom. But actually, that is freedom. When you can be disciplined enough, that's when the power comes.
And my mentor says that is love. Saying no is love. Because if you the feminine in me, the feminine in everybody, we want no restrictions. But can you imagine a life where there is no restrictions? It's called chaos. Correct. Imagine if there was no rules, there was no principles. So does that mean I can just come into your house, eat your food, take your stuff, take everything you've done? That is a life without rules and structure. So we need that. And that's one of the things that's missing especially in a lot of men and women. We're missing this fundamental things that gave us a lot more, I would say, our mental health. Because right now we are in a world where there is no structure. There's less structure. There's less restriction. And there's, whatever time you want to go to bed, go to bed. And I remember, so my son has to put his phone away, and he's nearly 17 years old. And he says, "Dad, why do I have to be in bed at, like 9:30, 10?" I'm like, you can be at bed at any time you want in your own home. Because I know what happens when you have had a good sleep, you feel really good in the morning, don't you? Because your monkey brain wants to be up all night, texting their friends. And his school friends, they're up 11, 12, 1 o'clock. And then they have to get up the next day for school. Yeah. That is, to me, where is the boundaries? Where is the love in that? I don't want to say no to them. I don't want them to be upset. Saying no is the most loving, caring thing to do.
I remember when I was young and I wanted to stay up late and I had to be in bed by 9. And I'm talking, I was about 8 years old, 7, 8. And my parents said, "No, you have to be in bed by 9. I made such a big sort of, you would think, honestly, Faisal, you'd think I was running for the United Nations I had these major talks with them about how I need my freedom and how I
Hmm.
need to stay up and there was this whole thing that went on and on and on. And finally, I persuaded them, or so I thought. And they said, okay, you can go to bed any time. Well, this was a coup for me. And I thought, wow, I can go to bed any time. So I pushed the limit. It was 9:30, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. They didn't say a word. I thought, wow, this is the good life. It got more difficult every day to get up, but it didn't matter because I'd won, I could go to bed.
Mm.
And then one day I thought to myself, oh, can't live like this. I was about 8. I can't live like this. I have to go to bed at 9. And I said,
Yeah.
I'm going to bed. And they said, why so early? Oh, because I'm just so tired. And they said, oh, but you wanted to be free. Yes, but I'm just so tired. And I'd rather go to bed at 9. And then I
Yeah.
understood, you give people what they want, whether that be children or adults, and they go out and do what they want. And then they realize actually you find that equilibrium, don't you, within yourself? Even as children, you know it. You think, I'm just too tired. I can't even get up. I can't concentrate. So, this of you giving, you know, your son this strict regime, I actually am all for that.
Absolutely.
I think it's
Yeah.
absolutely correct.
Yeah. And it's because it's like going to a buffet and all you can eat. Okay, you have that freedom, but there's going to be consequences.
Yeah.
And this is what society really does not focus on is what are my consequences? Well, I
Yeah.
want freedom. You really want freedom? Okay, then there's going to be consequences of that, and you experience that. Eat because, for example, I have some nights where I'll say to my son, "Listen, if you want to stay up, because I don't want it completely that's regimental. Like, for example, on a Friday night, he has got no school the next day or college the next day. I said, okay, you can have some time. So he will stay up. And the next day he'll feel rubbish about it. I'm like, okay, cool. You know the consequences of that. And then you can appreciate why these rules exist,
Mm.
why there is, because society, you cannot have a society without rules. Without rules, we are getting fat, we're getting more stressed, we're getting more tense, we're getting more destructive, self-destructive. So we need to have temperance. And the Stoics, one of the virtues of Stoicism, it teaches you temperance. You're going to have that balance. So if you're out on either side, it's going to be destructive. Of course, if you have too many rules, and sometimes, I can be over authoritarian. And then this is where the feminine comes in and she says, well, you know what? You could be more relaxed here. I'm like, yeah, okay, let me think about this. And I think about it. I'm like, okay, yeah, you're right. So that's why we need community. That's why we need people around us to help us give that mirror. And one of my most amazing mirrors is my sister. She really helps me to see the things I cannot see. And I help her to see the things that she cannot see. And like my coach helps me and pushes me and challenges me and questions the things that I don't always see. And they're called blind spots. And we
Mm.
all have them. No matter how evolved you are as a human being, you're going to have these blind spots. And that's where the growth happens. It's in those blind spots that we consistently work on.
I agree with you because I think that everybody has something to learn from somebody. Um, you from me from you. And we have to be fluid in that we don't know everything. I'm convinced now at this point in my life that I actually don't know anything, but that's another story. um, but we
I
have
think
to,
Mark Manson said it really well. He said, imagine we were all wrong. And the whole point of life is just to be a little bit less wrong.
yeah, that's an interesting viewpoint. That's an interesting one. But we all have something to teach, and that's the beauty of it. And community, you absolutely, Faisal, hit the nail on the head, because that is what's missing, is community. If we have a community, we have the elders. There's a whole structure there of hierarchy where you listen to the elders. I miss my
Mm.
great grandmother, who was such a fountain of wisdom, and listening just to her stories was enough for me to learn so
Yeah,
many lessons. And now nobody really takes much attention of older people and the older generation in the West. I'm not saying so much in, different parts of the world, but pretty much in the West, that is how it is mostly, I have found, where
yes,
there's no respect. And I think you need to learn from your elders, because they have such a wealth of knowledge, a generational wisdom that you can't learn from the television, from social media, from anything, from books, from anywhere. It's a
so
life,
true.
it's a life lived, a life full of color, a life that is a tapestry of experiences. And that's what's missing.
100%. It is so much missing. And you can see this as we are becoming more independent, hyper independent, I would say. And that's there's no stories to pass on, because a lot of lessons in life are passed on through story, not just here's X, here's Y. We don't really always take that on board, but when we tell a story,
Yeah.
and the elders, I remember when I spent time with the elders, they all they communicate is in stories. Well, this happened and this happened, and
Isn't
there's
it
always
wonderful though?
it is. I'm like, wow, we do not have the art of storytelling. I have an uncle, and I have to sit down, and I'm like, my ears are like dog's ear. They're like really hyper focused, and I'm sitting there just listening to stories after stories. I'm like, tell us some more, tell us some more. It's like
Yeah.
bedtime. I'm like, no, come on, just one more. And then I
Yeah.
remember as us young kids, we would just be in awe, and the concentration level would be like laser focused. But we don't have that anymore. We just have these short form content, and which is very destructive. And
Mm. Yeah.
you can see a lot of, because we're losing that cohesion of community, we're also losing that cohesion of principles and respect. I mean, when you look at the way next generation of children are speaking to their elders and their school teachers, it's disgusting. And you go to some other countries, you will never see children, or majority of them, being so despicable. I was in Japan, and the amount of respect, the discipline they had for each other. Yes, of course, there has its flaws too. Which nation doesn't? But the level, the way they addressed and spoke to you, even my family in Pakistan, they would never raise their voice at me. They would never raise and speak to me in a very disrespectful manner. And I remember when my kids, I took them to Pakistan, and I hadn't been for 18 years, and they were like, "Wow, is this how the kids and the families speak to the elders?" I'm like, isn't that missing in society right now? You have kids on the bus will just be really rude, not even have any
Yeah.
etiquettes or manners. And I'm not saying all of them are, but there's a wave, or we're quite a trajectory towards that, and it's sad.
Yeah. Yeah. This is so true. And I had a nice experience recently, Faisal, with, I won't say the company, um, but it's one of those broadband companies, a famous one. And they came to sort out the broadband. And it was a young man, and he was from Bangladesh. He was born in England, but his family were from Bangladesh.
Mm.
And he was very, very polite. And I was a bit astounded, because of that. He was 24, and I was a bit shocked at his manners. Beautiful, I have to say. And we were talking, and we came on to, because I always talk to everybody, and we came on to the subject about love. And he said, "Oh, I have to um, get ready tonight because I'm going to see my potential fiance." And I said, "Oh," I said, "Well, where did you meet?" He said, "Oh, it's an arranged marriage." And I said, "Well, that's very sort of different," I said, "for your age group." And he was very open. He said, "Well, I have to say to you," and he was like an old soul. He said, "I have to say to you, actually, it's the best way because I've had a look around. My parents allowed, me to do that. But I came to the conclusion myself that I actually would like that because for me, family is important and I don't want to disrespect my parents. And I actually quite like her." I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yes, I really like her and I really like her parents. And I feel that as families, we could work together." Faisal, I tell you what, I was absolutely, I could have jumped up and down and said, I said to him, "Well done." And he said, "Oh, thank you." I said, "No, really." I said, "You were such a breath of fresh air for me to hear that from somebody so young." And he said, "Well, unless you respect your older generation, you have nothing left."
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
wise words from such a young man. So I totally get what you're saying and I agree with you. And the art of storytelling is one of the most profound and powerful things in the world that, you know, I've spoken about this before because I love storytellers and I'm the first one to sit and listen to a story. I want to hear your story. I want to know about your life. Tell me your story. Talk to me about your story and how, like 70 years ago, you used to go to the well and you used to say a prayer and then the water would come. Stories with wisdom and depth. That's what's missing.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good word to use, depth. And that's what most when I work with the guys is they lack that depth. So so one of the things that we work on is the reason we work on discipline, habits, is because we can start building deep roots. Because there's nothing more unattractive of a man who doesn't stand for anything but won't fight for anything.
Yeah.
Whereas if you looked at our forefathers, the warriors in our days, they would stand for something and they would stand very firm. And that's what strong men did. It was like yes is a yes, no is a no, and they wouldn't be pushed around. Whereas a lot of guys now, especially the nice guys, so the nice guys are the guys who can just push them around, and they'll be okay, whatever you want. That's why they don't get respect from women, is because they don't stand up for themselves. So whatever, if anybody pushes them, they'll adapt to that opinion. So what is it that you want? Oh, I don't know. Well, you should stand to this. And they'll be like, oh, okay, I'll stand to that. And then they'll go to somebody else and they'll go, oh, well, that's my opinion. So they'll very much mold themselves into other people's opinions, but they don't have any deep roots themselves. So how can that be attractive in a relationship?
I think that happens with women as well, though. I think,
Yes.
doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just men. I think that happens with women where they become people pleasers and just do everything for the men and end up being walked upon. And actually, if we were to rise above men and women's status for a moment and look, I was always taught when I was young, rise above a situation and look down, and it's never quite what you think it is. And it's actually a fundamental part of human nature. I think that
Yeah.
you have to have respect for yourself. You have to stand your ground as a person. That doesn't mean that you're aggressive, far from it, entirely the opposite. But you have to take your position as a human being. We have been given a divine right to be on this planet and to be truly who we really are in our whole beautiful uniqueness. That's the point, that we embrace who we are.
Yeah. Yeah. We definitely um, need that capacity for both, all of us, men and women, and even kids as well, that capacity to say no.
Yeah.
Capacity to say no when we want to say no, and yes when we say yes. And again, that comes back down to boundaries.
Yeah.
And, when we have a lot of people who are people pleasers, afraid to say that because, well, a lot of us are afraid to say what we want or do is because I don't want to be abandoned. I don't want to be left. I don't want to be alone. So therefore, I'd rather have the scraps of love than to be alone or lonely. And again, that's just an adaptation that we have.
Scrapped. Yeah, that's a good word. Chris Rea, the singer. Have you heard of him? He's an old,
Yeah, it does.
yeah, like driving home for Christmas and all
Oh,
that.
yes, yes, yeah, yeah.
But I love him. And there's one line, I think it's called Gone Fishing. And you can spend a whole lifetime trying to be what you think is expected of you, but you'll never be free.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that sort of sums it all up. And I think your work is fantastic, Faisal. I think
Thank you.
it's such, like with the young gentleman with the broadband company, what you're doing is fantastic. I love that you have all this background as well with the storytelling, with the discipline, with all of that, because that in itself makes you unique. And that you have walked those footsteps, you know that path, and that's why you can take other people upon that path.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's all the world needs is just like I was, guided. I didn't have a father who was very strong and he guided. He wasn't guided himself. So we have so many men and so many women who are unguided. And what the world needs right now is good, conscious guidance so we can then start to heal our fractures, start to heal these traumas, because again, it's not going to happen overnight. It's going to take time. But what we can do is still play a part in that. Like one step at a time, can we start to, set some more rules, set some more boundaries that safeguard us, helps us to improve our mental health. And all we're going to do is just do a little bit for the next generation, and the next generation does it for the next generation, and they'll have that ricochet effect of just helping more generations heal. So the more we have guidance, the more we have conversations like this, and again, we have social media. And the positive side of social media is there is a lot of people that are bringing guidance. Again, there's a lot of noise, but now there's a lot more guidance. And even my kids, when they consume some content on there and they have some knowledge, I'm like, okay, that's really good because they've listened to strong individuals and they've got some support, they've got some guidance. So again, I think the world is going to go slightly the other way first, which is going to be more painful, more isolated. And then I believe it's going to swing back. So we're going to come back to more cohesion, more unity, more connection. Unless AI takes over completely.
Well, I'm convinced it won't.
Oh, it's coming. It's coming.
No. Because you know why? I think the human soul is so powerful. And yes, we can use all of these things that are invented, which are ultimately invented by human beings. Um, computers didn't invent us. So I do feel that all of these things that we're sort of witnessing right now on the planet, we're meant to be, because this is the way that the world is going. And we've agreed to be part of it all and to learn whatever we have to learn. And quite rightly, we need the guidance, but guidance from good people. And from people that actually are genuine and want to make a positive influence on people's lives, because there's so many out there that want to steer people in the wrong direction. But I think once we are, I suppose, empowered by for example, having a coach or having a guide or, you know, someone who does work like yourself, who's genuine in his intention. Once we have that power, we always have that power, but are reminded of that power, I suppose, um, the world will change again and it will actually be something so magnificent. But until we claim that power, I think a lot more has to happen.
Yeah. And it'll take time. We
Yeah,
are evolving. But what we can do in the meantime is just bring some change the world that we're in.
yeah,
And
yeah.
that's the only way we're going to start changing it. I love Rumi's quote. I've got this as one of my favorite quotes is live life as if everything is rigged in your favor.
Because it is.
Yeah.
It
Even
is.
all the problems, all the
Yeah,
tribulation, all the stuff that we see, just thinking, okay, well, just live life. Everything's in your favor, and we could again
yeah,
bring a back community, back connection, bring back some structure and respect for ourselves and for everybody else.
yeah, yeah. Thank you so much, Faisal.
Thank you for
It's
having
been
me.
absolutely fantastic and so lovely and refreshing to listen to somebody who has such deep values. It's really fantastic to hear.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I really enjoyed the conversation. It's gone from the desert
Yeah,
to to
it's
the
been a
kids
journey.
behavior. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Like the alchemist journey, and it comes back.
And here we are back again. And for people out there that would like to contact you and find out more about your work and what you do, where can they get hold of you?
The best way is to go to my website, which is again, it's open to both men and women, which is to find out how bad your fracture is. So you can find out some of the fracture damages that affecting your relationship, and then something that you can do about it as well. So my big purpose, and I believe that the purpose has chosen me rather than I chose it, and so I've now really embraced this purpose. So they can go on fivefractures.com. So that's the number five, fractures.com. And
Uh-huh.
there's a quiz on there. And it gives you, the website gives you details of what the fractures are, how they impacts you, what the symptoms are of each fracture. And then what it can do is the more awareness you have which fracture is kicking off, the more you can really start making changes towards it. And then eventually you can find somebody, a guide, a support or coach or therapist or something to help you. And you can even take that analysis of saying, look, these are the things that show up in my life, or these are the fractures that show up in my life. What do I need to work on? So I've made it just a universal 5 fracture quiz. And when the guys fill it in, guys will have an option to work with me because I'm just working with guys. I do consult women now and then,
Mm-hmm.
but that's if they're really stuck on how do men work, what is it about men, what is this about. So when they have specific questions, trying to understand how the men work, then again I can help and support them there. But usually my training is designed specifically for men.
Okay. So they can come to your site
Yeah,
and
fivefractures.com.
the
Yeah.
fivefractures.com. Okay, brilliant. I'm enlightened, I have to say. I have been reminded of some beautiful things, such as The Alchemist and storytelling and elders and communities and all these beautiful things that I hope one day we can all be part of again, Faisal.
I'm sure we will.
Excellent. Thank you again. And please come back again sometimes and
Yeah,
share
definitely.
your wonderful wisdom and what you've been up to.
I will do. Thank you
All
for having
right.
me.
Okay. Take care. Bye bye. Faisal Khokhar. Always fascinating, really, to hear such different views and stories from my guests and expert opinions about what is life and love all about? Wonderful. Thank you so much for joining me and my guests and sharing these precious moments together. It's really so appreciated. Until next time, take some time to find love. Lots of love to you, and take care of yourselves.
Thank you for listening to Secrets for an Inspirational Life, brought to you by your host, Mimi Novic. Please remember to subscribe to the podcast, and see you in the next episode. For more information about Mimi Novic and her books, music, and inspirational work, take a look at her website, www.miminovic.co.uk.